good as you could possibly get without finishing someone. And take into account Vettori's impossible to finish. So only reason why it's not S tier is because he didn't submit him or he had some trouble in the beginning of the fight. So for example, and also Vettori just kind of sucks. Let me just put that out there. That's really why it's not S tier, because Vettori's just not that great. So it's like, we can only rank this performance so high, but at the same time, you're breaking records. You know what I mean? You're making an adjustment after getting rocked in the first round. Remember, Jared Cannonier, he actually got hurt in the first round, but the fact that he came back from that, battled through adversity, switched it up, and just found his groove, never got tired. His cardio looked great. Just a really good showcase from Jared Cannonier. Leon Edwards' performance against Colby Covington, I'm going to throw that in the expected tier. Now, a lot of you guys are going to be saying, whoa, this was a disappointing performance. He hardly did any damage. But I disagree with that in the sense that, listen, he still deserves credit for making Colby fight a certain way. Now, yes, Colby sat on the back foot and shat his pants. Fair enough. But Leon Edwards being an imposing guy to stand in front of, who is so good at keeping distance to where you're not going to be comfortable to shoot a takedown from far out. You're not going to be comfortable to start letting your hands go from far out. He's going to be feinting in front of you and kicking your lead leg to force you to switch stances. Like, Leon Edwards deserves a lot of credit for shutting Colby down and making him look easy as well. It was a little bit of both. It was Colby crapping his pants and Leon Edwards forcing Colby to fight like that. The only issue is that he didn't really do enough damage for me to say it was a B tier performance on top of that. You know what I mean? You could have thrown 5 extra strikes per round and we would have had a different take. A couple of extra jabs here and there wouldn't have hurt him, but he didn't do that. So that's my take on the Leon Edwards fight. It was an okay performance. He made Colby look easy. He deserves credit for shutting down Colby, keeping good distance, showcasing all the feints that just had Colby confused. But at the same time, it's like, we can only rate that so highly. Okay, so there's that. And speaking of Leon Edwards, I'm going to put him in the S tier for his performance over Kamaru Usman. And I guarantee you, everyone's going to be freaking out right now that's watching this video, or at least most people, because Leon Edwards is boring. How could you possibly put Leon Edwards in the S tier? He's so boring. Just because he's had a lot of boring performances doesn't mean that this performance was boring. I agree. Leon Edwards is boring. His 2 fights with Usman, at least the rematch and the trilogy, were actually the entertaining ones. And the rematch makes this one more impressive. Okay, remember, Leon Edwards lost the majority of his rematch with Usman. And everyone was saying, yeah, he beat Usman with a lucky kick. But skill-wise, he just ain't good enough to hang with the guy. Usman's the CEO VPO. His pressure's going to get to Leon. And Usman's washed up after the KO as well. Some people were saying that, so there was a little bit of both, right? Well, number one, Kamaru Usman got shut down and embarrassed in this fight and got made to look silly on the feet, and Leon Edwards was able to look his best in the later rounds. His output was about 5 times the output that he had against Colby Covington, so it's not like it was just a slow performance. He skillfully shut Usman down and shut up all the people that were saying that he just got lucky with the kick. And it's aged well because Kamaru Usman, who we could have said was washed up after this, went out there and took 2 rounds off of Khamzat Chimaev, who was a young guy who had a year to prepare to be a bigger person at the 185-pound weight class. He took 2 rounds off of him. So actually, Usman's still pretty fucking good. It's just Leon shut his ass down because he's better. So, yeah, you could talk about this not being the cleanest performance because he grabbed the cage a couple of times and he grabbed the fence and there were some cheap moments. But at the end of the day, it's over one of the all-time greats who's a top 10 fighter to ever do it, who still in some way has their skills and isn't totally washed. And he proved that against Khamzat. And I rate that higher than the ones that are below this. Like, we're going to forget about Cannonier and Marvin Vettori. Leon Edwards' win over Kamaru Usman in the trilogy was his best win in the sense that he displayed his skill set as best as you can. And that'll be remembered for a long time. That's like Jones's win over Daniel Cormier in the first fight. That's like Volkanovski's win over Max Holloway, where he really solidified himself as the much better fighter in the trilogy, right? So I have to say this is S tier. And I know that Leon's boring, but I don't give a fuck. This is an S tier performance, all right? Next up, we're going to go with A tier, another A tier fight. Jamal Hill schooling Glover Teixeira for 5 rounds and getting out of horrible positions on top of that. So That's ultimately why it's going to be A tier, right? Number one, 50-45, as dominant as you could possibly get on the feet. The striking exchanges, unlike the Yuri fight, were not in any way competitive. Jamal Hill really had no issues in this fight. It actually could have been stopped on a couple of occasions. Like, the skill gap on the feet was that wide that the referee could have had a standing TKO multiple times in the latter half of this fight. But it makes it even more impressive that Jamal Hill got taken down and gave up mount to a grappler as good as Glover that a lot of people were picking to win this fight because of the grappling advantage that we thought Glover was going to have. And Jamal Hill just bucked him off and got right up every single time. No issues on the ground. So, it's one of the best performances I've seen. It's a title fight, so in a way, it's a little bit better than Cannonier versus Vettori. But the only reason I can't say it's S tier, it's because Glover Teixeira, even though he was still good at the time, because it's only like, you know, he had lost one fight before that, and he was the champion in the fight before that. He's still in his 40s. You know, it's not the same level as Kamaru Usman. This is not an all-time great, what we're talking about. Oh, you're saying Glover's not an all-time great? Dude, I got to walk on eggshells with some of the people that are watching this. I know some people are going to say, not an all-time great. Are you out of your mind? I mean, he's not like a top 15 fighter to ever do it. It's still a good win. But it's over an older Glover, who was still tough. But, you know, it's not S tier. On to the next one. We're going to go with Benoit Saint-Denis and his performance over Thiago Moises, finishing him in the second round. People tend to look at this fight like it was a scrap, it was a war. There was a 20-second moment where it was in the first round, and that was it. Other than that, it was total domination. The reason why it's not A tier, S tier is because it's over Moises. All right, case in point, I was talking about Glover and Jamal not being S tier. I was talking about Cannonier and Vettori not being S tier because it's over Vettori. Well, this is over a guy that's not a can, but he's also not like a ranked fighter that's that great. So, I still rate it highly though, and this is why. Number one, nobody has ever beat Thiago Moises this way, and I think that this performance is in some way very impressive because of this. Islam Makhachev has fought Thiago Moises. Okay, Beneil Dariush has fought Thiago Moises. Both of them kind of stunk it up. Even though they controlled the fight, even though they dominated the fight in some way, it was stinky. It wasn't really entertaining. Benoit Saint-Denis went out there and broke this man in the striking and in the grappling, where most people thought that Moises was going to have a grappling advantage over him. And he made it so dominant that, you know, the finishing sequence wasn't just like a one big punch KO. He was just beating Thiago Moises up until he was in the fetal position and totally quit in the second round. He couldn't take any more. So, beautiful performance from Benoit Saint-Denis, just showcasing how much of a monster he is. And again, you can compare this to some of the other lightweight contenders that have actually made it to the top, and it's more impressive than their performances over him. So it's a good litmus test, in my opinion. Just not A tier because it's over Moises. So let's get on to the next one. Now another A tier performance from Islam Makhachev, head kick knocking out Volkanovski. The reason why this isn't in the S tier is because there are a couple of asterisks on it. And even the S tier fight that I have, Leon and Usman, has a couple of asterisks over it. And I understand that I made the argument that for Leon, beating Usman is that it's also S tier because it's over one of the best fighters to ever do it. And for that reason, you may be saying, well, why don't you put this performance up there because Volkanovski's one of the best fighters to ever do it. I understand that. But I just think that there are more asterisks in this one. Volkanovski, I know that if he has a full training camp and he gets hit by the head kick, he's getting knocked out no matter what. But I still believe that if Volk has a full training camp, he doesn't fight as hesitantly, right? He's not so obsessed over the idea of, I have to knock him out with a perfect shot. I can't fight with high output. I can't fight like I normally would because I know I'm going to gas out. Leading up to this fight, Volkanovski was saying, I got to fight him differently. I got to fight him differently. I'm going to gas out if I don't. I can't take that chance to go into the deep waters. And for that reason, I don't think he fought like he would normally fight. So there's a little bit of the asterisk in that. The fact that the guy showed up fat as fuck. He went on a brutal weight cut, right? A 55 weight cut for Volkanovski is usually smooth sailing. But this time it was brutal because he had a week and a half's notice, and that's it. So there are a couple of asterisks, but you still have to give Makhachev credit for beating an all-time great and for setting up the KO perfectly and imposing himself making Volkanovski a little bit hesitant. You know, he was big in the cage. He was landing the long rangy kicks, keeping Volkanovski at a distance, going low, then going high. It was the classic high kick setup, and it was a beautiful performance nonetheless. That's why it's A tier. Next up, we're going to go with Pantoja and his performance over Brandon Moreno in their third fight. I know it's considered the rematch because, you know, their first fight was on Tough, I believe. But either way, this was an amazing fight, one of the fights of the year. But we're not here to just give it credit because it was a fight of the year. I'm here to judge Pantoja's performance. And the reason why I'm saying it's B tier, not A tier, is because he took a shitload of damage, okay? He did rock Moreno and he did knock Moreno down, which is impressive, but he got his ass kicked for the majority of the fight while it took place on the feet. And he also really didn't do much with the grappling on top of that. Like, if he had taken Moreno down and beat him up on the ground, or he had him in a bunch of bad positions where he was getting close to submissions, I would have put it at the A tier, but it's still B tier because, man, he went out there and outdogged Moreno. Maybe not outdogged him. I'm not saying Moreno wasn't as much of a dog either, but he went out there and went mano-y-mano with Moreno, showcased grit, showcased heart, his toughness, and, you know, was able to out-grapple Moreno as well on top of that and knock down such a good boxer as well. So I still have to give it some credit, but it's not A tier because it was a dirty performance, and he didn't do enough on the ground to make me that impressed. So let's get to the next one. Moreno's still a good grappler. Back to Pantoja. We're going to put his performance over Royval in the disappointing tier. Okay? Again, you guys aren't going to like this, but at the end of the day, I'm just going to call it out how it is. I'm going to be objective. The beginning of the fight was somewhat entertaining where he was standing with Royval and rocking him on the feet. And whenever this guy's standing up on the feet, he's putting on a show. But in the last 3 rounds, dude, he stunk it up. He got half guard position and literally did fuck all with it and ruined the fight. Just made it boring. Like, I expected this to be one of the best fights of the year. And he even won the 5th round, which left a salty taste in my mouth because he got his ass kicked on the feet in the 5th round. And the reason why he won is because he wet blanketed for 2 minutes. And that was it. I couldn't stand watching this. It was real ugly. Again, I'll give you credit when you take someone down and you do something with it, for example. And I know you may be saying, Merab Dvalishvili's in the A tier. He didn't do anything with it. But at the same time, Merab Dvalishvili was failing takedowns. You know what I mean? He wasn't even getting the takedowns and wet blanketing. He's shoving Peter Yan around. And that's actually kind of entertaining to see Merab constantly twitching at times and breaking someone in front of him. Pantoja wasn't breaking Royval. He was just on top of him, breathing on his neck. And I don't think that that's that impressive. Okay, I'm not going to look at that and say, wow, look at how much skill is on display. Oh, yeah, skill. He's in half guard. It took skill to get to half guard. It took skill to get the takedown. But laying on him when you have a big size and strength advantage and not doing anything with it, not advancing position, not doing ground and pound, not looking for submissions, that's boring as fuck. And that doesn't take a lot of skill once you're in the position, okay? It takes skill to get there, fair enough. Yes, if you were to put me in that position with Royval, he would get out of that place, like, because he's a good grappler. But when Pantoja's a great grappler and he's in a dominant position and all he does is hold on, dude, that's dog shit to watch, and that's not impressive. So the shit was disappointing. It was boring, okay? Horrible performance in the latter half of that fight. The only reason why it's not horrifying is because he at least showcased some striking in the early rounds and did some damage on the feet. Another one, Khamzat Chimaev, another horrible performance with his win over Kamaru Usman. I say win. It was more of a draw. He lost 2 out of 3 rounds to Usman. Now, yes, there were some things that were impressive about this, which is, number one, taking Usman down. That's impressive. The first round that he had was impressive, where he almost submitted Usman. He landed some good ground and pound shots, but he gassed out after 5 minutes. And I just don't think that we hyped Khamzat up for him to gas out after 5 minutes and drop 2 out of 3 rounds to Kamaru Usman, who's taking the fight on short notice, who also didn't have a year to bulk up into middleweight, right? That was what he had to show for a whole year being out. Like, I was thinking, man, Khamzat was dominating people while he was active. Imagine how good he's going to be now since he's had 2 years to get ready for this fight. Or maybe not 2 years, but it's been a while since the Kevin Holland and Gilbert Burns fight. He's going to have improved a lot. I didn't see many improvements. You know what I mean? And we weren't hyping this guy up as the chosen one for him to go out here and stink it up once he was in his prime. You know, we weren't hyping him up to go out there and have close fights with people. That's not what the hype was about. The hype with Hamza was that this guy was the Mike Tyson version of grappling in MMA, that if he were to take you down, it doesn't matter who you are, you're going to get out grappled, and he's going to submit you or tee off on you with ground and pound because he'll just be too many steps ahead. And he took Usman down, which is impressive. He did it in the second round. He did it in the third round as well. But he literally wet blanketed and did nothing. And I never thought that I would see Khamzat Chimaev hold on for dear life. He had 5 minutes in him, and that was it. And he literally lost the majority of the fight. So, horrible performance, totally disappointing. The expected version of this would have been if he were to at least had, gone out there and outstruck Usman or done a little bit more work in the second and third. Maybe had threatened a couple of submissions. But at the same time, it's like, bro, Khamzat was expected to go out there and finish Kamaru, and he didn't. On to the next, another terrible performance. Now, this one's going to go into the horrifying tier, and that is Corey Sandhagen's performance against Rob Font, which was just terrible. Okay, he was expected to go out there and strike a little bit on the feet, even if it wasn't going to be a war, even if he wasn't going to entertain a slugfest or a boxing match. We expected to see some stand-up in this fight, and the fans were really hyped for it. And instead, he stunk up the building worse than Bilal, okay? And he took Rob Font down and literally did nothing with the takedowns other than lay on top of him. And whenever the ref was about to step in, Corey Sandhagen would nudge him a little bit with an elbow, okay? Little nudges with the elbows. That was about it. Granted, he did tear his tricep early on in this fight, and that's why he resorted to fighting like that. So I understand why he did it, but dude, this fight sucked. Like, this was horrible to watch, and I'm never going to rewatch this. No one's ever rewatched this one, and it's one of the worst performances I've ever seen. Injury or no injury. Just because he's injured doesn't mean that the performance still isn't terrible. Jilton Almeida stinking it up against Derek Lewis in Brazil. Now, to be honest, there are still some impressive things about this. The fact that he's taking Derek Lewis down multiple times, picking him up, slamming him, keeping him down, and Derek Lewis has the ability to just get up. Like, he just defies physics at times as well. So there's that. You're basically just sitting on top of this guy in full mount, where that's a position where you're able to rain down elbows, and you're choosing just to look a man in his eyes instead and riz him up. So terrible performance. He was supposed to go out there and submit Derek Lewis and make him look easy if he were to get the takedown. We were talking about the light heavyweight skill, how it's going to be too much for Derek Lewis to deal with. This is a submission expert. Lewis has lost to Spivak, but Jilton Almeida is just a better version. And he goes out there and does what he did. So it was really frustrating to watch. One of the worst performances of the year by far. And I look at him as a different fighter after that. So, all right, guys, now we're going to go to the A tier. And I'm thinking about Edson Barboza's performance over Sadiq Youssef in the fall. Okay, now, this was a war. And I understand that a war is a dirty fight, and it's not the cleanest looking performance, and I'm being a little bit biased towards Edson, but the reason why I'm putting this here is because this is the craftiest performance I've ever seen in my entire life. Now, I say the word crafty, and what I mean by that is, like, this guy no longer has the same speed that he did in his prime. His body is not as durable as it was in his prime. He's gotten finished a couple of times. And for that reason, Edson really had to rely on the fight IQ, the experience, the tricks that he had up his sleeve. And I really rate that highly. He's displayed some of the best fight IQ ever. So, for example, he almost got finished in the first round. So that's impressive in and of itself, to battle back through adversity, to not lose your cool, to not give up, to say, all right, I've been here before. Let me just rely on these skills that have gotten me through my career. He starts mixing it up to the body. He starts sitting behind his jab. The flashy Edson Barboza, not throwing any flashy techniques, just sitting behind the basics. All of a sudden, third round, Edson Barboza lets a spinning wheel kick go. The first flashy technique of the fight for the most part. He drops Sadiq Youssef, almost finishes him. The fourth round, okay? Edson Barboza has now won 2 rounds after almost getting finished in the first. It's a close round, and guess what he does at the last 30 seconds? He turns up the volume and lets go like 20 strikes to make sure that the judges can see that and give him the round even though it's close. In the 5th round, Edson Barboza starts outstriking Sadiq Yusuf and says, you know what, this guy still has a punter's chance. There's only a couple minutes left of the fight. I may as well get my hands on this guy and just expend all of my energy trying to ragdoll him and just muscle him to the ground a bunch of times. And Edson Barboza goes out there and wrestles to steal the round and shut down any chance of being KO'd at the last second. Such good fight IQ, such good ability to navigate through those waters, those dangerous waters, right? And for that reason, I have to give him credit as having one of the best performances of the year, okay? S tier, we're going to go with Sean Strickland and Israel Adesanya. This is also over one of the better fighters of all time in Adesanya. Maybe not top 10, but, you know, that's a top 20 fighter ever. He's a middleweight champion that had defended his belt multiple times. No one expected Sean Strickland to do what he did. And he went out there and shut down a guy that was talked about as being one of the best strikers the sport has ever seen. Now, personally, Adesanya has always been an overrated striker, and I gave Strickland a chance to do well, but not even I thought Strickland was going to win this fight and not win it dominantly, especially not dominantly. 49-46ing Adesanya, making Izzy, a seasoned kickboxer, swing and miss and just look like an idiot and gas out from missing so many punches is something that was really impressive. And I got to give Sean Strickland credit. Masterclass, schooling, really good performance from him. That's S tier, especially because it was a title fight over a guy that's still, you know, close to his prime. One of the greats. Great performance. S tier 100%. But let's go to the B tier. And let's give Corey Sandhagen some credit for beating Chito Vera. Beautiful performance. I could say this is A tier because he 50-45'd him and Chito Vera is fighting for a title and that's a really good ranked opponent, 100%. But I don't know, man. I feel like he was kind of expected to go out there and do this as well. So I'm not going to have it in the expected tier just because it was still really good. But it's just one notch above the expected tier because, for example, you look at all of these performances that are in the A tier. None of us really expected those to happen. Like, no one really expected Leon Edwards to outskill Kamaru Usman in the S tier. No one expected Sean Strickland to outskill Adesanya on the feet, right? We kind of expected Corey to be better than Chito, but it was still really clean. So I'll put it in the B tier. He took Chito down. He did damage, unlike his fight with Rob Font, right? There was one moment in the first round where Corey had taken him down and he landed like 15 elbows to Chito's head. None of them sliced him open. But overall, it was dominant, 50-45. He outstruck him on the feet as well. One of the judges scored this fight for Chito, by the way, which is just insane. But yeah, really good performance from Corey Sandhagen. Again, I would like to put him in the A tier, but he was expected to go out there and do just this. So there's that. Next up, we're going to go with Song Yadong in the B tier for his performance over Ricky Simone. So the reason why it's not high, like A tier or S tier, is just because he was kind of expected to go out there and beat Ricky Simone. But man, he looked perfect in this fight. He looked patient. He picked his shots well. He dropped Ricky Simone a couple of times, knocked him out in the last round as well, and stuffed basically every single takedown that Ricky Simone had to throw at him. So beautiful performance over a pretty decent contender, but again, he was kind of expected to go out there and do it. So I can't really put it that much higher than the B tier. So let's get on to Sean O'Malley knocking out Aljamain Sterling. So this is going to be S tier as well. Number one, it's over one of the best bantamweights to ever do it, who was the favorite. So it impressed all of us because it wasn't that expected. Even though we kind of knew O'Malley could chin him, for him to actually go out there, stuff every single one of Aljamain's takedowns with ease, and just make it look perfect, this was one of those cases where he had to be perfect, right? I talked about Volkanovski having to be perfect in the Makhachev rematch, where he was worried about gassing out because he didn't have a full training camp, and he didn't want to rely on 5 rounds and having the ability to go a hard 5. O'Malley had a rib injury. He was worried about getting taken down because of the rib injury, and he was going into this fight thinking, man, life or death, I cannot let this guy touch me. And people were saying, man, doesn't sound very confident. This isn't looking good. But he went out there, stayed patient, and executed. Made no mistakes whatsoever. So I have to say this is S tier because of the lack of mistakes, because of how perfect he was in this fight. knowing that it would have been a real issue for him to get taken down with that rib injury. So massive respect to Sean O'Malley. Beautiful performance, beautiful KO on top of that. Aljamain Sterling, speaking of Aljo, I'm going to put him in the B tier for his performance over Henry Cejudo. So the reason why I'm not saying A tier is because it wasn't really that dominant, you know what I mean? And, like, listen, man, I talk about fight IQ from Edson Barboza and whatnot. Aljamain Sterling's a smart fighter, but at the same time, I think that Henry Cejudo has always been a little bit overrated. He's kind of just a guy that's a glorified brawler on the feet that bites down on the mouthpiece and grits down and throws big shots, but at the same time, Aljo took down an Olympic gold medalist, which is impressive, and Aljo outstruck someone in Henry Cejudo who most people thought was going to outstrike him. Yes, it was a close fight, like 48-47 close, but at the same time, it's still a good win. You know what I mean? And it wasn't expected. Most people were picking Henry. But again, can't go to the A tier because it was extremely close. So, yeah, good on him for that one. Ilia Topuria. I'm going to put him in the B tier for destroying Josh Emmett. Now, listen, I know that the scorecard was like 50-42. I understand that. But at the same time, man, I don't think it should have been 50-42. There were many moments in this fight where Josh Emmett was landing some shots and Ilia Topuria wasn't really doing much, and Ilia was relying on those big knockdowns every now and then. But at the same time, I got to give him credit where credit's due. He evaded the big meaty hooks of Josh Emmett for the majority of the fight. He still outclassed him. He still shut him down with perfect boxing. And in the later half of the fight, he took him down a couple of times and showcased some good grappling. But it's not going to go A tier just because people expected him to go out there and beat Josh Emmett. And on top of that, it's still Josh Emmett. I don't care if Josh Emmett knocked out Bryce Mitchell recently. I'm not just going to think of him as someone that, oh, we were wrong all along. He is really that guy. He is a future champ. No. He landed a big meaty hook on the chin of Bryce Mitchell. One punch, landing flush, does not mean everything people have said about him is not true. It's still Josh Emmett, who had lost 3 fights prior. He lost to Yair, he lost to Ige, he robbed Ige, and he lost to Cater, who he also robbed. So Josh Emmett's still not that great. You know, he was expected to go out there and beat Josh Emmett dominantly, and that's what he did. So we'll give him B tier. Let's get on to the next one. Max Holloway and his performance over Arnold Allen. So Holloway showcased good fight IQ. He looked good and whatnot, but this was about as expected as you could have possibly gotten. Like, there wasn't really anything that Holloway did in this fight that was that impressive, that really shocked us in any way. You know what I mean? And he didn't really beat Allen up that much. Like, some people thought he was going to go in there and have like a Calvin Cater-esque performance over Arnold Allen. I didn't think that was going to happen. I just saw that Arnold Allen's a low output guy that gasses out, and there's no way he's going to be able to throw with high output over the course of 5 rounds with a guy like Max Holloway who never gets tired. And he's not going to knock Max Holloway out either because Holloway is a granite chin. So again, good performance. He won 4 rounds out of 5, but at the end of the day, it's like, you know, Holloway's unfinishable. We kind of know that by now, and he's got high output. We know that by now. So, you know, there wasn't anything that special about this one. On to the next one. That is Ian Gary destroying Neil Magny. So, you know, to be fair, I feel like maybe this should be in the expected tier as well, but he did make Neil Magny look like a fool in a way where no one's ever done that to him, right? Like, Neil Magny's been knocked out before by a big, ugly shot on the feet after a scrap with Santiago Ponzinibbio. But the only way people have been able to dominate him since is by taking him to the ground and subbing him. When people stand up with Neil Magny, they get clinched up against the fence, and it's an absolute stinkfest every time, and it's hard to actually damage him. Ian Gary, despite having like a 6-inch reach disadvantage to Neil Magny, still made him look like a fool on the feet and totally shut him down and got a 30-24. Every single round was a 10-8. So that's pretty damn impressive. But at the end of the day, it's still Neil Magny. He was expected to beat him. And like Ilia Topuria's performance over Josh Emmett, he was expected to go out there and finish him. So next up, we're going to go with Brendan Allen's performance over Paul Craig, submitting him and dominating him on the ground. Really good work. Landed damage. I talk about wet blankets, right? This was the opposite of a wet blanket. He was working on the ground the entire time, trying to advance position, hitting Paul Craig with ground and pound shots, and I expected him to go out there and knock Paul Craig out on the feet. So for him to beat Craig where Craig is at his best is really something to commend. So great performance. I guess I could put this in the A tier, but it's still over Paul Craig, and I think that we've overrated him for some time, and he's a little bit old too. So that's where it'll be. John Jones and Cyril Gahn is going to go in the A tier. All right. Now, at the time, I was really upset about this because I wanted there to be a fight, and we didn't really get to see a lot of John Jones. But at the end of the day, we saw what was going to happen if he took him to the ground. Okay. And I think that all of us were thinking that Jones is going to try to get the takedowns. I picked against him because I thought Gahn was going to make it impossible for him to get the takedowns because Jones couldn't take down Reyes. He couldn't take down Thiago Santos. So how is he going to take down LeBron James, who has the potential of like a LeBron James? That's how I was thinking of him, right? So it's still a good win. And I know I overrated Gahn, but, you know, listen, if you're out here submitting Cyril Gahn within the first couple of minutes, and it's not like Gahn just made one mistake and gave up his back. Like, Jones worked for the position really hard. He took Gahn down. Gahn got up for a second. He took Gahn back down, pressed him up against the fence, and worked towards the mounted guillotine. Beautiful performance. Bullied him into a submission. That's really, really skillful of John Jones. And getting Gahn out of there, who was basically undefeated at the time. Like, I know he lost to Francis, but he shouldn't have lost that fight. I thought that he beat Francis Ngannou. The 5th round was clearly for Gahn. Is still good. So this is going to be an A-tier performance, showcasing just a massive gap in skill when it comes to the grappling. And, you know, we talk about Jilton Almeida being a good grappler. Couldn't finish Derek Lewis, for example, and maybe he could finish Gahn, fair enough. But John Jones is finishing the guys that are at the top of the division, that are the ones that are more athletic, that are more capable of learning on the ground compared to the fat guys like Derek Lewis. So, beautiful performance from John Jones, even though I was pissed about it and it looked really fishy at the time. And it wasn't an aesthetic submission either, meaning you couldn't really see the actual submission, right? You just saw them up against the fence. We didn't really know what was going on, and all of a sudden John Jones gets up and the ref calls it off, and we're like, what the fuck just happened? Robert Whittaker getting destroyed by Dricus du Plessis. This is going to go in the A tier, guys. This was a beautiful performance as well. Sloppy and boppy, for sure. Dricus du Plessis with that funky, junky style nonetheless, and he did take some damage in the first round, and he did get taken down too, so it wasn't perfect, but that's kind of how Dricus just fights in general. But I'm still giving it A tier because none of us expected this to happen, so he really did pass the test with flying colors. And I mean, dude, we didn't think he was going to be able to go out there and beat Whittaker in the first place. For him to finish him, and not only finish him, but for him to take Whittaker down too and beat him up on the ground and have Whittaker gassed after like 6 or 7 minutes was insane. Okay? And his defense looked great. He defended the high kick setup perfectly. He defended the hooks from Whittaker. Whittaker's lead hook, which was one of his best weapons. He defended those perfectly. So I'm going to say that's A tier. The only way it would have been S tier, I guess, is if, you know, Whittaker had a little... I mean, the thing is, man, Whittaker's a little bit chinny, so... Like, you can KO a fighter that's better than you because you can land that right shot. And Dricus showcased that he was better than Whittaker, period. He showcased that he was better than him by preparing perfectly for the high kick and the hooks and taking Whittaker down and beating him up and getting up to his feet when he got taken down. But the reason why it's not S tier is because Whittaker's Achilles heel is his chin. You know what I mean? So, like, I could see Whittaker getting KO'd, right? And he still did take some damage. It wasn't a totally clean performance. But then you could say, well, what about Edson Barboza? Yeah, but Edson Barboza is old and he has to be crafty, right? And it is going to be competitive when you're fighting the elite fighters. Whittaker's a young gun and du Plessis is a young gun. So it's like, you know, both of them are kind of in their prime. Anyway, let's get on to the next one, which is Alex Pereira knocking out Yuri Prohaska. Now, some of you guys may say, Lucas, this has to be higher. This has to be A tier. But at the same time, like 70% of people were picking Pereira to go out there and do just this. So it was to be expected. It was still a great performance, but I can't put it as an A tier because, like, again, no one expected Jones to go out there and submit Cyril Gahn in the first round the way that he did, as quickly as he did. No one expected Dricus du Plessis to beat Robert Whittaker. That's kind of why these are A tier. We expected him to do this. Even though I picked against Pereira, you knew this was very possible, right? he still needs some credit because he did take away Yuri's movement. He totally messed up Yuri's legs early on with those untelegraphed leg kicks, those perfectly set up leg kicks. And he still landed a pitch perfect combination, which is indicative that he was the more skilled striker. But he got clipped a little bit in the second round. It was getting a little bit hairy at times with Yuri Prohaska landing some good combinations on him, and it was to be expected. So I can't say it's A tier. I can't say it's S tier because of that, okay? Like, look at the S tier, as I said. And no one really expected O'Malley to stuff takedowns and make it look that easy. No one had expected Leon to make it look that easy and to display such a skill gap over Usman, a guy that had beat him for the majority of the rematch. And the same thing with Strickland. Okay? So if it's expected and it's not a shock, I can't say it's like S tier, A tier, but it's a beautiful performance from Alex Pereira. It's a beautiful performance nonetheless. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really liked making this one. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Until next time. When it comes to MMA, I don't beat around the bush and I don't sit on fences. I'm going to say it how it is. And if I don't like someone, you're going to know. If I do like a fighter, you're not going to hear the end of it. So today, I'm going to challenge myself and force myself to say nice things and compliment my least favorite UFC fighters. And after that, I'm going to critique and find some negatives that may not be apparent at first glance for my favorite UFC fighters. We're going to go over the good guys and the bad guys first. Before we get into it, I want you guys to let me know if you disagree with any of the takes in this video. Drop them in the comments. Without further ado, let's check out the suspects. Well, the bad guys are here. They're lined up, and here's suspect number one, no other than Justin Gaethje, Mr. Title Shot, or I Riot. That's right. Every time this guy gets into a title fight and gets dominated in under 2 rounds, he tells the UFC that if he doesn't get a number 1 contenders fight, if he's not next in line for the belt, he's gonna riot. Who the fuck does this guy think he is, bro? His best wins are over Donald Cerrone and, of course, Edson Barboza. That's a good win. That's one of the positives. But before we get into the positives, more crimes that Justin Gaethje has committed, aside from bitching and complaining about not getting a title shot despite getting dominated, is the fact that he is very dark and cold. He's an asshole towards other fighters. There is no such thing as a warm Justin Gaethje quote in an interview towards another fighter, bro. Justin Gaethje is like one of the darkest guys that there are when he talks shit about other people. Like, he's gone on record to say this guy should burn, that guy's the scum of the fucking earth, and you just know that he has this anger inside of him when he talks about other fighters. He's too serious, bro. And he gets butthurt so easily. Even when he was like responding to Colby Covington at their press conference with Kamaru Usman, bro, like, he just had this anger in him that cannot be faked. And I don't like that about Justin Gaethje. He carries himself like a cocky prick. He's also delusional, bro, because he's gone out here and he said that Conor McGregor only fights people that he's beat already, which is just bullshit. Conor's mopped the floor with Eddie Alvarez, who finished Gaethje. Conor's fought Dustin Poirier 3 times, beat him once, and Gaethje got knocked out by Poirier. So it just doesn't make sense at all to even go out there and say that. Again, he's a punk, he's a schmuck. He calls people quitters, which is just really disrespectful. He called Charles a quitter leading up to their fight, despite the fact that Charles had gone out there and proved time and time again in his win streak that he was no longer a quitter. I don't know, man. What are the positives about Justin Gaethje? Because I just went in on him. I love this guy's fights. What can I say? That's just the first thing that comes to mind. The highlight, that is a perfect nickname for Justin Gaethje. He goes to war every single time. He's one of the most entertaining fighters in the UFC. Sure, he may not be the most violent man in MMA like they go and say, but like, nonetheless, bro, he's definitely one of them, and you have to respect it. There is not one Justin Gaethje hater that doesn't want to see him fight, because he brings it every time, and he's gonna drag you into a war, bro. He made Khabib stand in the pocket and trade with him, bro. Justin Gaethje's just not gonna let you get off the hook easy. You're gonna go through the fire if you want to take this man out. And that's what I love about Justin Gaethje. He always shows up to fight. He has a really entertaining fighting style. And like, he has that knockout power. He's gone out there and put on really good performances over Tony Ferguson. He's knocked out guys like James Vick that needed to be humbled at the time. And yeah, really entertaining fighter. Bring in the second guy, John Jones, suspect number 2. Crimes, Well, his first offense is he robbed Dominic Reyes, a daylight robbery. We all know it. Drinking and driving? I mean, how many times has Jon Jones been caught drinking and driving? Domestic abuse? Listen, there are alleged people that may have done stuff, but Jon Jones has been proven to bloody up his significant other to the point to where his daughters had to call for backup and PEDs. Of course, this man has cheated, and it's been proven. He's popped more than anyone else. Too good. What do I mean by too good? Why is that a crime? Well, I can't help but want to see someone just have a weakness, bro, because I've seen it against Dominic Reyes, bro, and he's just so good. He's been dominant for so long that I'm starting to feel like it's more interesting to see someone else take the crown. I want to see the evolution of MMA. I want to see MMA continue to grow, and that means that the guy that has been a champion since like the early 2010s, I don't want him to necessarily be the best anymore, but he is. And what are the positives about Jon Jones? Entertaining fights. Jon Jones has put on a lot of entertaining fights. Even his most boring fights against like OSP and Thiago Santos, it's still a Jon Jones fight, and there's still an aspect about a Jon Jones fight to where if he loses, that's going to be one of the biggest upsets that you've ever seen in your entire life, and you want to be there to witness it. Also, he is vicious in the cage, bro. Jon Jones has had a lot of entertaining performances where he's gone out there and brutalized people and took it to them and wanted to hurt them badly, and we like seeing that as MMA fans. The best fighter that ever lived. That is really cool. Jon Jones was put on this planet to just force people to lose to him and never be able to beat him, and that's just the facts. He's the Thanos of MMA. Also, he's like a real-life movie villain. I listed out all the crimes. Well, what do you know? Most of those are legitimate crimes, and you know this guy's mean, and you know he's bullshitting in front of the cameras talking about how he's a man of God and a Mr. Church humble guy. I mean, we know who Jon Jones is, and even when he's talking himself up like the choir boy that he thinks he is, we could see right through it, and it's like a psychopath in front of our eyes. And that's like a real movie villain when he gets in the octagon and beats the fuck out of people. So it's entertaining to watch, bro. There are many things to like about Jon Jones. He's a character. I think he's fun and entertaining on his interviews because of that element where you can kind of see through the bullshit and know who he really is. So those are the positives about him. He's as entertaining as it gets. What can you say? Israel Adesanya. Bring in the third suspect. Crimes. Cringy fans overrated. That's right. I think that Izzy is definitely a phenomenal striker. He's been a good champion, but he's also a champion, or was a champion, in one of the shittiest divisions in the UFC. Also, he is not a perfect striker. He's been outstruck on multiple occasions by Alex Pereira, and his fans, as I said, cringy fans, are still saying, despite him losing 3 times to Alex and getting finished twice after having the best performance he could possibly have against Alex in the trilogy and still losing, that he's better than Alex Pereira on the feet. It's just so tiresome. He's got outstruck by Whitaker in their rematch. He got outstruck by Jan Blachowicz in their fight, basically lost every single round. 2 of 3 of those rounds on the feet, bro. And all I have to say is his fans are still saying that Jan won with takedowns, which is just bullshit. He's not a perfect striker. You have Joe Rogan having aneurysms on commentary when Adesanya's doing nothing but throwing feints and a couple of leg kicks per round, talking about how he's a style bender, absolute avatar anime god in the fucking cage, but he's really not doing that. And he's always talking himself up big time, bro. He's always talking himself up big time and shitting the bed in his performances, saying he's going to go out there and finish Jared Cannonier. He robbed Robert Whitaker and Yoel Romero, in my opinion, and that can't go overlooked. Gyno, PEDs, come on, guys. You cannot grow a tit in your 30s. It is absolutely impossible. It doesn't work like that, man. I'm someone that's been lifting for a long time. I've been into bodybuilding for a long time, and that's just not something that happens naturally. You will not grow a boob on one chest in your 30s. He's probably taken sauce and cheated as well. But what do I like about Israel Adesanya? He's a little bit cringy with his personality because he has like the anime weeb thing going on, and I'm not really someone that resonates with that, but he is someone that you just can't help but watch, bro. It's like, you don't like me, but you're still gonna watch, and Israel Adesanya has that thing, dude. He has charisma, whether you like it or not. Also, his walkouts are sick. He has some of the best walkouts in the UFC. He also has some of the most legendary performances. That war with Kelvin Gastelum, the iconic fight with Anderson Silva, the knockout over Robert Whitaker in front of a packed, sold-out, record-breaking crowd. This guy is entertaining even when he's boring, if that makes sense, bro. And he's put on some good fights, and he's had really good fights with Alex Pereira. His next fight is going to be must-see TV. He's just had some boring matchups against guys that weren't that good, which is why I think he's not one of my favorites, man. And people overhype him too much, despite the fact that he doesn't really do all of that in the octagon, bro. So yeah, Izzy is entertaining. He's got amazing walkouts, good sense of music, and man, you just kind of want to tune in to watch Izzy fight as well, because even if you think he's overrated, you want to see, is he going to lose this time? Is he actually going to put on a good performance over a guy like Costa? Yeah. Next up, Sean O'Malley. This punk, again, I can't stand Sean O'Malley anymore. I used to be a big fan of him. I used to watch Sean O'Malley's podcast with Tim Welch back in 2018 when him and Tim had like 5,000 subscribers, bro. And I used to really resonate with him, but not anymore, because he just has the personality of like a teenager. He's all into the weed and yeah, dude, yeah. Like, I just can't get behind it, man. He doesn't really have anything of any substance, and he acts like he doesn't give a fuck about the MMA game. And I think he tries to act dumber than he really is. He tries to play too cool for school, bro. And for someone that is such a future star, like the UFC likes to say, for someone who is going out here himself and saying he's going to be the next Conor McGregor, like, you have to learn how to talk some shit on the mic, bro, because he shits the bed and he can't complete a full sentence at a press conference. He stumbles over his words. Even with a guy as dense as Cody Garbrandt, he can't come up with a good response, and he got out trash talked by Petr Yan. He has nothing to say, and I just feel like it's all the look. And of course, his style in the octagon is amazing, and we'll get to that in a second. But like, yeah, he robbed Petr Yan as well. He's delusional too. If you criticize him and you say that he didn't dominate Petr Yan, and you say, I think Petr Yan won, he'll call you a hater. He'll say, well, you're just hating on me. You don't know the sport and all that. But there are some really good reasons to criticize fighters sometimes, and I feel like they have to take that on the chin. And there's another way to respond to it other than being delusional and calling people haters because they thought that Yan may have got the edge on you. Anyway, what's good about Sean O'Malley? He's one of the most entertaining strikers in the world. I always am looking forward to a Sean O'Malley fight. Even when I was a big fan of this guy, man, he impressed me a lot and gained a lot of my respect after that Petr Yan fight. Whether or not he won or lost, I don't care about the way he handled it right now because I'm complimenting him. He proved me wrong. I thought he was going to go in there and get his ass kicked, have a couple of moments in the first round, and then get finished. But no, he actually won the third round, which is really good, and out-kickboxed Petr Yan. He has a lot of highlight reel knockouts, bro, and I feel like this guy would knock out the majority of strikers in the bantamweight division, which is still one of the best divisions in the UFC. He's going to bring it every time. He wants to fight on the feet. He has knockout power. He's extremely skilled. He's flashy. He's everything you could possibly ask for. And he definitely pisses his opponents off. It's fun to see his opponents have a chip on their shoulder when they're standing in front of Sean O'Malley, who they like to call Poodle with the hair and all his antics. And it's just fun to watch them get butthurt in front of him, too. So that's another reason why I like Sean O'Malley. Yeah, man, interesting to check on his social media every once in a while. He's posting a cool video. But yeah, man, those are the good things about Sean O'Malley. Garam Kutateladze. I mean, come on, man. Garam, he's not a serious criminal, bro. He hasn't really done that much to make him a suspect. It's mostly the fans. Now, the hardcores right now are turning tomato red because they can't stand Garam Kutateladze slander. They're saying to themselves, how dare you? This guy could be a champion in 2 years. This dude is always 3 fights away from a title shot. Garam's arguably a top 5 lightweight, despite losing to Mateusz Gamrot. He got his hand raised, but we all know he robbed Mateusz Gamrot, and he lost to Damir Ismagulov, who got dominated by Arman Sarukian, bro. Damir Ismagulov had good takedown defense going into that fight. I even picked him to beat Arman and got humiliated and dominated by Arman and outstruck by him. And Damir Ismagulov outstruck Garam Kutateladze. This dude, sure, he's very well-rounded. He's skilled, but like, I just don't like how people think this guy is like the best fucking fighter that's under the radar when he hasn't even proved it at all in the octagon. He's just well-rounded. That's what it comes down to. He has no knockout power. He's not like a terrific grappler to where he's just going to go out there and bulldoze people and take them down and fuck them up on the ground. He's not significantly outstriking anyone either. Got outstruck by Mateusz Gamrot. So that's what I think of Garam Kutateladze. Just overrated, and it's just so tiresome how the hardcore fans act like they're just greater than thou, bringing this guy up. as if he's some secret UFC fighter, some hidden gem, when he's really not. And he's always injured. But what are the good things about Garam? He's shredded to the bone, bro. Look at this guy. If this doesn't motivate you, I don't know what does. He looks like an older man. He looks like a history teacher. But like, dude, this guy is shredded, bro. I mean, this dude's probably extremely disciplined. He trains with my boy Hamzat, and I love Hamzat Chimaev. We'll talk about him later in this video. And he is well-rounded, and he's fun to watch because he is skilled, and I'll give him that. I just feel like people literally say things like, this dude's probably going to fight for a belt one day, even though he's 32 and he's had 2 fights in the UFC in this last 3 years. Yeah, but he's shredded, man. So that's the thing for Garam. He's got a cool beard, bro. He mixes it up well. High-level MMA. He's not going to just get rolled over by these lightweights, but he probably will lose by anyone in the top 10. And finally, last but not least, the Smash Bros, aka the Party Poopers. Bring him in. Aljamain Sterling and Merab Dvalishvili, Aljamain's little henchman. Ganging up on the bantamweight division. These are their crimes. What do I mean by that? Listen, I feel like we all have a favorite fighter outside of both of these guys, okay? And these dudes are just ruining it all for us. Ruining our hopes and dreams of having who we want to be a champion in Petr Yan. And now Merab is trying to get in the way of that again because he's fighting Yan in 2 days. Also, Oscar-worthy actor. That's right. Whether you like it or not, he did fake being as hurt as he was against Petr. He looked fine. He was lucid. And then as soon as the doctor came in and started talking to Herb Dean about calling off the fight, he basically flopped back on the ground, milked it to oblivion, and took the belt home. Great performance from Aljamain Sterling, one of the best actors you'll ever see. Also, as I said, the henchman, Merab Dvalishvili has said that he'll never fight Aljamain Sterling. And although Aljo says, I'll leave the division soon, if he keeps that belt, Merab would happily dive at his feet and kiss his feet and say, okay, you can still be the champ, because we all know Merab Dvalishvili is just number 2. He's a poor man's Aljo. He does everything that Aljamain Sterling does, but worse. And I also don't like how Aljamain Sterling never fucking fights, bro. He wants to take his sweet time in between fights to get his, surgery and his stem cells, and it takes 2.5 years, even though it takes most guys like 6 months, bro. But as I said, I do think Merab's a poor man's Aljo, but they're like, butt buddies ruining our party in the bantamweight division. He robbed Yan in the first fight. What do I like about these guys? Saralongo boys, New York guys like me. So I got to respect that. I got to get behind my New York guys at least somewhat. And Aljamain Sterling beat Petr Yan fairly and squarely. He didn't do a lot of damage in that fight, but he won. And that is arguably one of the best bantamweights in the world. So that is extremely impressive to beat Petr. He's an underrated fighter, one of the best grapplers, most dangerous grapplers in the sport. And he's actually an underrated striker too. I think he's entertaining. I don't think he's a really boring fighter. He's just not my favorite. That's all it is. And, part of it is because he's teamed up with Merab, and they're always running around in hotels, trying to punk other guys. What do I like about Merab? Well, he has these funny run-ins with Petr Yan when Aljamain is fighting him, and he'll get up in Petr's face, 2 of the Eastern Europeans, and he'll talk a little bit of smack. But, yeah, that's always fun to see on Instagram, on your Instagram feed. Merab also is a very tenacious fighter. He just fights hard, bro, and that's what I like. I like seeing a guy like that. People will call, like, Colby Covington boring, but Merab is like a poor man's Colby insofar as that he can't hold guys down, but nonetheless, he's really trying, and he's gassing people out, and he has a very high-paced style, and that is fun to watch, bro. I don't think Merab is that boring. I really don't. But these guys are a funny duo. They're goofy. They're goofy goobers. Next up, the good guys. On to the second half of the video. Hero number 1, Ciryl Gane, resume, bone, gamin. I don't think there's anyone that's cooler than Ciryl Gane in MMA. When he walked out to fight John Jones, I was thinking, if this guy beats Jones, he'll be the coolest man that ever walked the planet. And that fucking song that he chose, the French song, was just insanely dope, bro. And I've been listening to it at the gym, getting the Bone Gamin vibes on. And he's just cool, man. He's cerebral, surreal. He's chill. He's laid back. He's not like a guy who comes off as a tryhard. He has no chip on his shoulder. He's funny. He has the best fucking laugh, bro. All right, bro. I'm gonna stop glazing, man. He's extremely talented as well. You cannot argue that this guy is not that talented. He's only been doing fighting for like 6-7 years max, and only 5 of those have been MMA. I think he's the most entertaining striker in heavyweight division's history, bro. He's really entertaining on the feet. He styles on guys, and if you're not going to take him down, you're probably screwed. So yeah, he has really good performances, fun performances over guys like Taito Ivasa, and he's just cool, bro. But what do I have to say about Gon that I don't like? I don't know, man. He just shit the bed and acted scared in front of Jones, and I didn't like that at all. Credit to Jon Jones, because he is Thanos and no one can beat him, obviously, but like, Jesus Christ, man, did he shit the bed? Because he looked scared. He was throwing a little jab to the body, pip squeaking away, darting away 15 feet. And come on, man. Can you leave Ferdinand Lopez and get some other looks? Go out there and train with Jon Jones in Albuquerque. I'm sure he won't feel threatened by you because he just dominated you. And hey, he'd like to get some looks on the feet and train with a guy like Jones. What better grappler to train with? Also, I just think that this guy needs to train more often in the wrestling department with other trainers. Look at how successful Francis was when he left MMA Factory. What else about Gon? I don't know, man. There's not really much to hate on him for, but I mean, like, just get better at grappling. You're super talented. Just focus on the wrestling and you're good, bro. On to the next one. Volkanovski, my favorite UFC fighter. Hero number 2, bring him in. Volkanovski, blue collar, epitome of talent, working hard. That's how good Volkanovski is. That's why he's so amazing, because he's not only extremely talented, but he is just such a hard worker. After his loss to Islam, which pretty much looked like a win in my book, he went right back to the gym and trained with the guys that are fighting in regional promotions, bro. You know he's humble, man. And also Coach Eugene Behrman, who's always big upping his fighters like Israel Adesanya, said that Volkanovski is the only Western combat sports champion that he's ever witnessed that has not lost laps in judgment, motivation, or drive since they've become successful. And that's just something that is really good about Volkanovski. He's always going to be improving. He's always working hard. He mogs everyone out there. Volkanovski's literally dominated and humiliated everyone that he's fought. And he even did that to Islam. Humiliated Islam on the ground, laughing at him, popping him in the face while he had his back, saying, "What do you got? You're going to submit me, right? You're going to submit me, right?" That was a cold moment. And he's respected by everyone. The best striker in UFC history, in my opinion. The best striker in the UFC right now. What are some things I don't like about Volk? He misses opportunities, bro. And I'm a social media guy, right? So I feel like this is something that a lot of people